So we've had this fountain on the back porch for some time. The previous owners had this fountain laying around, and I kind of modified it and has a 5-gallon bucket partially buried underneath for a reservoir. And this is a really early pot that I made. But you could see right away I realized, oh, so I've been setting stones, and eventually I just threw this coffee cup on it, and algae grows on it, and whatever. It's worked, it's fine. The birds like it, but I want to make a fountain that's better. So that's kind of the basis of this build. So the first thing I need to do is throw the main pieces for the fountain, and that's going to consist of a lower foot ring, a lower bowl, middle riser, medium-sized bowl, and then some sort of a topper. And I'll figure it out as I go. I don't really have measurements. As long as the first piece matches the next piece, I should be okay. And I'm removing this not because you're going to see it, because you're obviously never going to be able to see this. It's all going to be glazed together. But it's just a little too thick, and so I'm doing this more to make sure that it doesn't crack when it dries. And I'm going to leave it relatively thick, as all of these pieces are. Now this is quite dry, but I think I want to chatter this. So I'll take the same tool, and if I engage the entire flat, I'll get kind of a little lines, and if I use the point, it takes little divots. Both are good, but I'll see if I can get a chatter going here. Sometimes it's better to angle it in because you're trying to get it to bite and jump. And this is a little dry, but it's okay, we'll get a pattern. Whoa, there's the tip. So that's what it looks like when you use the tip. I really don't want that, so I'm going to carve that out right now. All right. Now I can use a drill later to put the hole I'm going to need for the pump for the water hose. Let's go ahead and see if we can remove a plug to get us going right here. And we'll be able to see just how thick this is. It's quite thick. It's kind of an aggressive move. The deeper you go, the more grabby it is on the tool, and the more likely it is to just rip this thing right off the bat. So keep waiting for the moment where I can pop it out. But if all else fails, we'll just eat it away. There we go. There we go. All right, that's it. Okay, next piece. There, I think that's good enough. Well, this one, being such a wide ring, is really kind of sloppy, kind of floppy. So I'm going to try to round it back into shape, and then when I remove it, I'll have to round it again most likely. That's okay. This is going to be down, hopefully somewhat underwater, but we'll see. And you might rightly point out, hey, why don't you just let that sit out and then hand carve it with a fettling knife and sponge it? And I probably could. Seems a little more convenient. Now, you see it's not quite perfectly round because I kind of bent it out of shape. Gotta love the speedball. That's okay. If you have a piece that's a little bit lumpy, I like to run the wheel a little slower so you're kind of still able to follow the contour. So I'm going to go set this aside, make sure it looks round when I leave it to finish drying today. Okay, so I need to get this stuck on, and this kind of oversized, it's really more of a tray, not a bat, but I'll use it as a bat. That barely fits the rim of the largest bowl, so let me go ahead and see if I can get this to spread out a little bit, and we'll stick that down. Alright, sloppy. Good enough. So you see I'm just aggressively digging my fingers in, trying not to drop it. part that was on the bat. Really soft. So I'm going to let this chill. I really don't want to deal with this sticky. And we don't need to do much. I just need to get rid of my finger marks, close this in, dig out a foot, put a hole. And I'd like to see if I can chatter this in a similar fashion as the other bowl, so I have some continuity. Yeah, that'll work. Okay, it's been maybe 45 minutes. It's a hot day and it is noticeably stiffer. Still soft, but I want to get this done and drying, so let's get going. Now on this one, I do want to remove maybe 1/4 of an inch of width on the foot to ensure that it fits inside the piece I'm going to set it on top of. But again, this is just really more about cleanup and a little chatter. Still hitting my finger marks. You can see my tool is kind of jumping. Sometimes it's hard. It's easier to cut a line down than to try to just ride this thing in. But it's not easy. It's going to want to grab, and I really am worried I'm going to chuck this thing on the floor. This little tip can pop up and snag and rip across your piece. Just got to be careful if you're doing it this way. Lines I'm not super happy with. I could take a rib to it, but I'm just going to go ahead and chatter it. It's going to be on the underside of the bowl. We'll glaze it, obviously. But chattering hides a lot of sins, too. Just because of the shape of this tool, it's really hard to get texture right up to the foot, but it's going to be sitting on something, so you actually won't be able to see that bit. You know, I think that looks okay. I'm just going to leave it just like that. Oop. Yeah. Just gonna let that be, let it dry up. I'll come back and put the hole in off camera, and of course I'll make sure it looks like it's gonna fit. My measurements tell me it will, but I'm gonna let these stiffen up and get ready to bisque. So I just wanted to show you kind of a dry assembly. It's gonna go something like that. So not huge, and I really kind of thought twice about whether I should have carved this deeper so that there wasn't such a reveal, but I think that's going to be beneficial. I'm going to glaze this heavily. It'll flow down. It'll give it a good place to pool. I don't mind admitting that these were separate pieces, but I think that's going to be pretty cool. So before I fire the fountain, I thought, well, wouldn't it be fun to like put a little frog or a little something on the edge and see if we can make it look a little more interesting. And so I've been doing a little sculpting using oil clay. In this case I have a bit of a wireframe I built this frog around. Maybe not the best example, but oil clay is really fun to use because it simply does not dry out. And you can get it in different softnesses, like this red here is a little bit softer. I was using it to do a little bit of fixing on that hip joint there, but we're definitely not going to be able to get, I'm not going to be able to get something this fine with the thin legs and whatnot using regular clay, but it's kind of fun to do a little bit of a warm-up exercise a couple times, build something out of oil clay, take your time, get a feel for what it should look like. And now I'm going to see if I can sculpt something. Nothing like this, but just a little sitting frog. We'll see if we can fire that. Maybe I'll make a couple, and when we do the final firing on the glaze firing on the fountain, I'll set that on the rim and we'll see if we can get that to be part of the piece. So here's the basic idea. It's kind of hard to do this on camera because you got to flip it around and move it around in your hand, but basically going to sculpt out a rough shape. I think the eyes are important. I'm not really going for photorealism, but it definitely helps to have a little bit more convincing of an eye. So just hollowed out a hole. Going to install these little balls of clay like that, and I'll kind of fiddle with it until it looks right, and then all the legs and whatnot are gonna attach to the body like a frog might sit with all its kind of legs tucked in. It'll be a lot easier to make it look right. And this is really thick, so when it's all done and I get it right, I'm gonna come back and I'll hollow out the bottom where you're not gonna see it, and then we'll see if we can get it through a fire with still make it look right. So I'll come right back to you. Okay, so I have the eyes kind of where I want. A little bit of a jawline mark there. It's okay. But it would be nice to have something that looks pretty real. So now I am laying out what'll be some tucked in legs. Kind of like that. We'll make these elbows, knees rather, look right. We'll tuck some little legs in the front. So, let me do that. Okay, so here's my little frog attempt. I don't know, I keep messing with it. Looks a little funky, but I think it'll do. And that's the real hard thing, is trying to work with this fast enough. It dries quickly, you want to bend something, you get cracks. So you got to move quick. You can see I don't have a whole lot of definition, just the shape. And now I'll take this and I'll scoop out as much as I can underneath, and we'll let this dry, and we'll get that in the bisque along with the fountain. We'll see if we can place that somewhere on the fountain just for fun, see if it works. Well, it's out of the bisque kiln. Everything looks good. It's time to glaze it, and I've been kind of debating what to do with Senior Frog here. My initial thought was something like that, just set nicely, and I'm sure that would work. But whenever I've made these fountains, I end up needing some sort of diffuser, like a stone laying on the top or something to break, otherwise it can bubble too much and splash too much. And so I happen to have these leftover extruded pieces, and I'm thinking I want to put Senior Frog up there. I don't know, put some a little bit more in your face. He's a little bit funky looking, I'm not sure, but I think that'll be fun. And also because I like the idea, I might snap these off before I glaze them, but I like the idea of having a perch for birds to come land. And in terms of glaze, I'm not going to take you through all the dunking in buckets and whatnot, but I'm going to do this bowl and this bowl in white. I'm going to do the bottom ring and the middle ring and the bottom half of this in a red, and then the top bowl here will be in white. I want to talk about what I'm going to do to the frog in terms of color. I'm not sure yet, but in one way or the other the frog is going to be green, and then I'd like these sticks to be, I don't know, maybe a Temuku, dark brown, something contrasting. So that's the plan. So I've gotten white glaze on the two bowls as well as the top of the final bit, and now I'm going to put the red on these two. But I have my maker's mark in the year on this, and I really don't want it buried. But I also don't want to have, you know, just smear some wax on this and have a big naked spot. I mean, I guess it would be fine, but I feel like I can do better. So I want to show you, in case it really didn't work out, it went real poorly, you would have a context for what I tried to do. So I'm going to take a black underglaze. I'm just going to rub it in there and sponge this off. There. So I'm going to take a translucent green, kind of a fake chino maybe. I'm just going to put some over the area here. But I'm going to pay a little more attention to shape when I put some wax over just the area I want exposed. We'll sponge the rest off, and that way it won't be a naked piece with your maker mark. At least it'll be an interesting color. In this case, hopefully light green. Okay, I got my wax. I want to do this in one shot. That's it. And one common mistake I've made in the past is, I'm sure I'll do it again, is I don't let the wax dry up as much as it needs, and I'll start to scrub it with a sponge, and I'll rub the wax off. So, gotta really let it dry. Well, that seemed to work fairly well. A little bit of red, but overall pretty good. So here they are, and we're going to put them in the kiln in the next, well, this evening I should say. But next thing I need to do is get some Temmaku on these sticks and paint the frog. I'm using black velvet underglaze, Amico. I just want to get the eyes. Get any cleanup I need done, and then get some wax on them. Actually, I take that back. Take that back. I may do a clear on them, so I don't want wax. Alright, well, let me finish this up. I'll come back to you. Okay, so the underglaze is on the eyes. And I've changed my mind. I was really thinking I was going to go through my test jars and old leftover small amounts of glazes and use up some interesting green combination. But I've decided instead to do this in the seafoam that you see so often. And that means I get to dunk it. And I'm going to make sure I thin it really well. But what it means is I want to wax the eyes. And before I can wax the eyes, I want to put some sort of a clear glaze on them. Not some sort, I want to put this clear glaze on them. I'm putting it on real thin. But I have found that these velvet underglazes, they just have to have something on top of them. Ooh. So I'm going to put some clear on them, let that dry, and then we'll wax them. And then we'll dunk the whole frog in seafoam, and we're good to go. So I wanted to use this seafoam, but I wanted to use it thinner than I normally do, and I really didn't want to thin the whole bucket. So I've got some thinner seafoam green, and I want to pour it across the bottom. Ooh, how do we get this guy here? Like that. Okay. Then I want to set it on these two brushes. Ooh, come on, don't roll around. All right. We'll see if we can pour this over. Okay, so I'm loading the kiln. I thought it was worth pointing out. I made sure that my kiln was perfectly level, as best I could measure, and then installed that bottom shelf, also confirmed it was level. And then each time I set one of these pieces, I go ahead and make sure it's perfectly level, best as I can see. And that's going to give me the best shot of having a more even flow of water. If it's tipping to one side even a little bit, it's going to be really obvious. So this will give me a fighting chance. And I'm checking level in both directions, of course. Okay, here it is, all stacked up, ready to go. What's your bet? He's going to bend really funny, or I don't know. I have good feelings. I think this is going to go well. Well, I think that looks really good. I don't see any problems. Let's get it out and take a closer look. I think it turned out really, really good. Didn't quite get the light green I was expecting, but at least it has a glaze on it. It's not raw. The temaku on the sticks turned out great, but of course I'm so happy. The frog just turned out great. By thinning that sea foam, I got it to break in kind of those pink tones. The eyes stayed nice and clear, shiny black. Temaku on the sticks looks really good. No, I'm super happy with that. We had a little bit of crawling where this glaze was a little thick, but I think it looks great. And I'm not sure you can tell, but there's kind of a metallic fleck in the sun. Nope, I call that a win. So what I'm going to do to seal up the hole between this pipe that I'll put up the middle and I want to make sure it doesn't all flow down. So I've cut a piece of this is actually like a really thin industrial floor mat, and it'll fit just like that. So I'm going to slip this with a little bit of silicone around the edge down into that bowl, and then when I bring up the hose, we'll kind of pop it through, and that will be all the seal it gets. And if it leaks a tiny bit around the edge, that's okay. It all goes back down to the same reservoir and it'll just get pumped again. We just want to make sure that most of the water goes to the top. Well, here it is running. Man, is that an upgrade from the last one? I am really happy with this. I definitely think that being able to glaze the different pieces separate colors makes just such a big difference. So I hope you enjoyed that. I think that was a real win.